The great hall of the Galactic Assembly stretched for miles in every direction. Lights of 1,000 colors floated in the air above the gathered delegates. Species from every corner of the known universe sat in their assigned seats, their eyes fixed on the central platform where the vote was about to happen. Ambassador stood alone in the human section. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple style, and she wore the formal blue uniform of Earth's diplomatic corps. She kept her face calm, but her heart beat fast inside her chest. Today was the day. After 3 years of work, Earth would finally learn if it had earned a seat on the United Species Council. High Speaker rose from his throne at the far end of the hall. He was a tall creature with pale gray skin and 4 arms that moved like water when he spoke. His kind, had led the council for 10,000 years. They believed themselves to be the race in existence. The Assembly will now vote on the matter of Earth's membership, announced. His voice echoed through the hall like thunder. All delegates will cast their decision. Watched the holographic display appear above the platform. Numbers began to climb on both sides. Yes, no, yes, no. The votes came in faster than she could follow. She found herself holding her breath. Around her, the alien delegates whispered to each other. A group of small creatures covered in golden fur pointed at her and laughed. The insect-like clicked their mandibles in what she had learned was a sign of disgust. Even the usually friendly refused to meet her eyes. The voting stopped. The hall fell silent. Looked at the final numbers and felt her stomach drop. The rejection was not close. It was overwhelming. Out of 400 voting species, only 12 had supported Earth's membership. 12. Smiled, showing rows of small teeth. The vote is complete. Earth's application for council membership is. A wave of sound washed through the hall. Some delegates cheered. Others simply nodded as if the result had never been in doubt, stood perfectly still, refusing to show any emotion. The Assembly recognizes High Speaker for closing remarks. An automated voice announced. Stepped forward, his 4 arms spread wide. Let me be clear about why this decision was made. Humanity is young. Your species has existed for only a brief moment in cosmic time. You have no ancient wisdom. You have no great achievements beyond your own small world. He paused and looked directly at. But more importantly, your kind is dangerous. Your history is written in blood, war after war, weapon after weapon. You turned your own planet into a battlefield before you even reached the stars. How can we trust such a species with the secrets of the Council? Wanted to speak. She wanted to tell him that humans had changed, that they had learned from their past, that they had spent the last century building peace instead of weapons, but the rules did not allow her to respond. Earth will remain in observer status, continued. You may watch our proceedings. You may trade with council species, but you will have no voice, no vote, no power. This is the decision of the Assembly, and it is final. The gavel struck 3 times. The session was over. Walked out of the great hall with her head held high. She did not look at the delegates who stared at her. She did not react when someone threw a piece of fruit at her back. She simply walked, one step after another, until she reached the human shuttle bay. Her assistant, a young man named, was waiting for her. His face was pale. He had watched the vote on the broadcast. Ambassador, he said softly, I am so sorry. Climbed into the shuttle without a word. Only when the doors closed and the engine started did she allow herself to feel anything. Her hands shook. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. 3 years. 3 years of meetings and negotiations and careful diplomacy. 3 years of smiling at creatures who looked at her like she was an animal. 3 years of proving, over and over, that humans were worthy of respect. And it had meant nothing. The shuttle lifted off and began the long journey back to Earth, stared out the window at the massive space station that housed the Assembly. It was beautiful in its own way, a monument to cooperation between species, a symbol of what the galaxy could achieve when it worked together. But there was no room in that monument for humanity. Sat across from her, his tablet in his hands. The news networks are already reporting the vote. Earth's government has requested an immediate briefing when we arrive. What are they saying? Asked. The president is angry. The military wants to increase our defense spending. Some senators are calling for Earth to cut all ties with the council. He hesitated. There are protests in Seoul and New York. People are burning flags. Closed her eyes. Tell them to stop. Tell them all to stop. Anger will not help us now. Then what will help us? She did not have an answer. The journey back to Earth took 6 days. Spent most of that time alone in her cabin, reviewing the vote records and trying to understand where she had failed. She replayed her speeches in her head. She examined every conversation, every handshake, every smile. What had she done wrong? The answer came to her on the 4th day. She had done nothing wrong. The vote was never about her performance. It was never about Earth's qualifications. The council had decided to reject humanity long before the vote ever happened. They were afraid. For all their talk of human violence, it was the council species who feared what humanity might become. They had watched humans grow from a primitive species to a spacefaring civilization in just a few centuries. They had seen human ships travel farther and faster than anyone expected. They had observed human scientists solve problems that had puzzled alien minds for generations. Humanity was not rejected because it was weak. Humanity was rejected because it was strong, and growing stronger every day. When the shuttle finally landed in Geneva, walked down the ramp to face a crowd of reporters and government officials. Cameras flashed. People shouted questions, but she heard none of it. She was thinking about the future, about what Earth would do now, about how humanity would respond to being told it was not good enough. The council thought they had put humans in their place. They thought they had stopped a threat before it could grow. They were wrong. They had just made humanity more determined than ever to prove itself. And when humans set their minds to something, nothing in the galaxy could stop them. Smiled for the first time in days. The council had no idea what they had started. 6 months had passed since the rejection. Earth had grown quiet. The protests faded. The angry speeches stopped. Life continued as it always did, with humans going about their daily routines and trying not to think about the humiliation their species had suffered. But in a research facility buried deep beneath the mountains of Korea, something extraordinary was happening. Doctor stood in front of a massive display screen, his eyes wide with disbelief. He had checked the data 7 times. He had run the calculations over and over. The results were always the same. "This cannot be right," he whispered. His colleague, a woman named, looked up from her own workstation. "What did you find?" Pointed at the screen. "Look at this. The genetic markers, the cellular structure, everything matches." Walked over and studied the data. At first, she did not understand what she was seeing. Then her hand flew to her mouth. "Is that what I think it is?" "Yes," said, "the void plague. I found its weakness." The void plague was the most feared disease in the galaxy. It had appeared 50 years ago on the edge of known space and had been spreading ever since. Entire worlds had been quarantined. Billions of aliens had died. The Council's best scientists had spent decades searching for a cure, but they had found nothing. The disease attacked the nervous system of any species it infected. It caused pain beyond description, followed by paralysis, followed by death. There was no treatment. There was no vaccine. Once you caught the void plague, your fate was sealed. But had discovered something impossible. Human DNA contains a natural immunity, he explained, pulling up more data on the screen. Our genetic structure is just different enough to resist the virus. It cannot attach to our cells. It cannot reproduce inside our bodies. We are completely immune. Stared at him. "Are you sure?" I tested it on human tissue samples. Then I tested it on live subjects, volunteers who agreed to be exposed to contained samples of the virus. He paused. None of them got sick, not even a fever. The virus simply died. Sat down heavily in her chair. Her mind was racing. If humans are immune, then our antibodies might be able to help other species. We could create a cure. We could save billions of lives. Exactly, said, but there is more. Look at this. He changed the display to show a comparison between human antibodies and the virus structure. Our antibodies do not just resist the virus, they destroy it completely. Within hours of exposure, the virus is dead. If we can synthesize these antibodies and modify them to work with alien biology, we could end the plague forever. Finished. They stood in silence for a long moment, staring at the data that could change everything. Then asked the question that neither of them wanted to face. What do we do with this information? Ran his fingers through his hair. We have to tell someone, the government, the president. This is too big to keep secret. And then what? The council rejected us. They called us primitive and dangerous. Why should we help them? Because people are dying, said quietly. Whatever the council thinks of us, we cannot let billions die when we have the power to save them. Looked away. The council would not do the same for us. Maybe not, but we are not the council. The next morning, and presented their findings to a room full of government officials and military leaders. President sat at the head of the table, her expression unreadable as she listened to their explanation. When they finished, the room exploded into argument. This is our chance, General Park shouted. The council humiliated us. Now we have something they need. We should demand full membership as the price for the cure. That would be blackmail, said a diplomat named. We would prove everything they said about us was true. Who cares what they think? Park replied. They already hate us. At least this way we get something out of it. President raised her hand and the room fell silent. Doctor, how long until the cure is ready? At least a year, answered. We need to test it extensively. We need to make sure it works with different alien species. We cannot rush this. A year, repeated. And how quickly is the plague spreading? Another scientist, an epidemiologist named Sarah, spoke up. The latest reports say it has reached 3 new systems in the past month alone. At this rate, it will spread to the core council worlds within 2 years. Nodded slowly, so we have time to decide. Decide what? Park demanded. The answer is obvious. We use this as leverage. We make them respect us. Turned to look at him. And if they refuse, if they would rather die than accept help from humans, what then? Park had no answer. The meeting continued for hours. Every option was debated. Some wanted to share the cure freely. Others wanted to sell it at the highest possible price. A few suggested keeping it secret forever, letting the council suffer the consequences of their arrogance. In the end, President made a decision that surprised everyone. We will say nothing, she announced. Not yet. We will continue our research in secret, we will perfect the cure, and we will wait. Wait for what? Asked. Stood and walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting over the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of orange and red. The council made their choice, she said. They decided that humanity was not worth their respect. Now we will make our choice. When the cure is ready, when we are certain it works, we will give it to them, freely, without conditions. Park started to protest, but cut him off. Not because we want something from them, not because we need their approval, but because it is the right thing to do. That is what it means to be human. We help those in need, even when they have done nothing to deserve it. She turned to face the room. The council wanted to know what kind of species humanity is. They wanted to know if we could be trusted. This is how we show them, not with weapons, not with threats, but with mercy. The room was silent. Looked at, she nodded slightly. This was the answer they had hoped for. President returned to her seat. This information is classified at the highest level. No one outside this room is to know. We have work to do, and we cannot afford any mistakes. As the meeting ended and people filed out, lingered behind, he had one more question. "Madam President," he said, "what if the Council still rejects us after we give them the cure? What if they take our help and offer nothing in return?" Smiled. "Then we will know that we are better than them. And sometimes, Doctor, that is enough." She walked out, leaving alone with his thoughts. Outside, the stars were beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, the plague was spreading. Somewhere out there, aliens who had laughed at humanity were dying. And somewhere on Earth, in a secret laboratory, the cure was waiting to be born. 8 more months passed, and the galaxy began to notice something strange. Earth had stopped talking. Human trade ships still arrived at their scheduled ports. Human scientists still attended conferences. Human diplomats still sat in their observer seats at the assembly, but they said nothing beyond what was strictly necessary. They smiled politely, completed their business, and left without a word. At first, the council species did not care. They had never valued human conversation anyway. The silence was a relief. No more complaints about unfair treatment. No more requests for respect and recognition. The annoying creatures from the third planet of Sol had finally learned their place. But as the weeks turned into months, the silence began to feel different. It no longer felt like submission. It felt like something else entirely. It felt like a choice. High Speaker sat in his private chambers, reading report after report about the void plague. The news was worse every day. The disease had spread to 7 more systems. 2 council species had lost theirs completely. They who had laughed at Ambassador during the vote were now facing extinction. Their golden fur had turned gray and brittle as the plague consumed them from within. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. "Enter," commanded. His aide, a young named, stepped inside. His face was troubled. "High Speaker, we have a problem." "Another outbreak?" "No, sir, it is about the humans." Set down his tablet. "What have they done now?" Hesitated. "Nothing, sir. That is the problem. We have been trying to contact their government for 3 days. They do not respond. Our ambassadors on Earth report that all official channels have gone silent. The humans are not talking to anyone." Felt a flicker of concern, but he pushed it away. "They are sulking, bitter about the rejection. Let them be silent. It makes no difference to us." "With respect, High Speaker, our intelligence suggests otherwise." Handed him a data tablet. "These are surveillance reports from Earth. Something is happening in their research facilities. Something they are keeping secret." Scrolled through the information. Increased energy usage at multiple sites. Unusual shipments of biological materials. Scientists working around the clock under heavy security. "What do you think they are building?" he asked. "We do not know, sir. But given the timing, some of our analysts are concerned." "Concerned about what?" Took a deep breath. "Sir, what if the humans have found something? What if they have discovered a way to protect themselves from the plague? What if their silence means they are preparing to watch the rest of us die?" Threw the tablet across the room. "Impossible. Human science is primitive. Our greatest minds have worked on this problem for 50 years. How could those animals find something we missed?" "I do not know, sir, but the silence worries me." For a long moment said nothing. He stared at the wall, thinking about everything he knew about humans. They were young. They were violent. They were emotional and unpredictable. But they were also clever. Far more clever than the council had ever wanted to admit. "Contact Ambassador," finally said. "Request a meeting. Use whatever excuse you need. I want to know what the humans are hiding." Bowed, "Yes, High Speaker." But the request was, politely, professionally, without explanation. Tried again, sending personal messages to every human official he could reach. The responses were always the same. Thank you for your interest. Unfortunately, we are not available at this time. We wish you well. The silence continued. Across the galaxy, panic was beginning to spread. The plague had jumped to 3 more systems. Refugees flooded the space lanes, searching for any world that might be safe. But there were fewer safe places every day. The council held emergency session after emergency session. They debated quarantine measures. They argued about resource allocation. They blamed each other for the failure to find a cure, but they accomplished nothing. And through it all, the humans remained silent. Ambassador sat in her office on the assembly station, watching the chaos unfold. Delegates ran through the corridors, shouting at each other. Ships departed at all hours, carrying the sick and the terrified. The great hall, once filled with the sounds of 1,000 species working together, was now nearly empty. Entered with a cup of tea. You should rest, Ambassador. You have been awake for 2 days. Took the tea but did not drink. Have you seen the latest numbers? Yes, his voice was heavy. The ambassador died this morning. The plague took her in less than a week. Closed her eyes. They had been kind to her once when she first arrived at the assembly. They had shown her how to navigate the complex politics of the council. They had believed even then that humanity deserved a chance. Now they were dying by the millions. The cure is ready, she said quietly. Looked at her, I know. Doctor confirmed it this morning. It works on every species they have tested. 1 injection and the plague cannot touch you. 1 more injection and it will cure those already infected. Then why are we still silent? Opened her eyes and looked out at the chaos beyond her window. Because President wants them to understand. She wants them to feel what it is like to be helpless, to be dismissed, to be told that you are not worthy of help. That seems cruel. Perhaps, sipped her tea. But it is necessary. If we had offered the cure immediately, they would have taken it without a second thought. They would have continued to see us as useful tools, nothing more. They needed to suffer first. They needed to understand what it means to need someone who does not need you. Sat down across from her, and now we wait a little longer. The president wants the council to come to us. She wants them to ask for help, not demand it, ask. Will they? Smiled sadly. They will have no choice. Pride is a luxury that the dying cannot afford. 3 days later, High Speaker made an unprecedented announcement. He requested, publicly and officially, an audience with the human delegation. He did not demand. He did not order, he asked. The assembly watched in stunned silence as the most powerful being in the galaxy humbled himself before the species he had rejected. Received the request in her office. She read it twice, then set it aside and looked at. Tell them yes, she said, but not yet. Tell them to wait 1 more day. Why? Because tomorrow is the anniversary of the vote, the day they told us we were not good enough. She stood and walked to the window. We will give them the cure then. On the day they tried to destroy us, we will save them instead. Smiled. That is very human of you, Ambassador. Yes, agreed, it is. Outside, the stars continued to shine. Somewhere out there, the plague was still spreading, but its days were numbered. Humanity had found the answer. And soon, the entire galaxy would know what that really meant. The great hall of the Galactic Assembly had never been so full. Every seat was taken. Every species that could still travel was present. The floating lights above cast a dim glow over faces marked by fear, exhaustion, and desperate hope. Ambassador stood on the central platform, exactly where High Speaker had stood 1 year ago. The irony was not lost on anyone. Himself sat in the front row, his 4 arms clasped tightly in his lap. He looked older than he had before. The weight of the plague had bent his shoulders and dimmed the light in his eyes. Around him, the other delegates whispered anxiously, wondering what the humans had called them here to say. Took a moment to look out at the crowd. She recognized many faces, they who had clicked their mandibles in disgust at her presence. The remaining, their golden fur now thin and patchy from the sickness that had killed so many of their kind. The sitting together in grief after losing their ambassador. These were the beings who had rejected her species, who had called humans primitive and dangerous, who had laughed when Earth asked to be treated as equals. And now they were waiting for her to save them. Activated the broadcast system. Her voice would reach every corner of the known galaxy, every ship, every station, every world. Trillions of beings would hear what she was about to say. Members of the Assembly, she began, her voice clear and steady. 1 year ago, you voted to exclude humanity from the Council. You told us that we were too young, too violent, too dangerous to be trusted. The hall was silent, no one moved. You were afraid of what we might become. You looked at our history and saw only war and suffering. You could not imagine that the same species capable of such destruction could also be capable of compassion. Paused, letting her words sink in. Today, I am here to prove you wrong. She pressed a button on her console, and a holographic display appeared above her head. It showed molecular structures, research data, and test results from doctors' laboratory. Earth's scientists have developed a cure for the void plague, she announced. A complete cure. 1 injection will provide permanent immunity. A second injection will heal those already infected. It works on every species we have tested. A wave of sound swept through the hall. Delegates gasped. Some cried out. Others wept openly. Rose to his feet, his eyes fixed on the display. This is impossible, he breathed. How did you? Human biology contains a natural immunity to the plague, explained. Something in our genetic structure that no other species possesses. Our scientists were able to isolate this immunity and create a treatment that works for all life forms. The delegate stumbled forward, her thin legs barely supporting her weight. Please, she begged. My people are dying. We have lost so many already. Will you help us? Looked at her. This was the same delegate who had thrown fruit at her back on the day of the vote. The same one who had called humans disgusting creatures who belonged in cages. Yes, said, we will help you. Stepped onto the platform. What do you want in return? Council membership, political power. Name your price and we will pay it. The hall held its breath, waiting for humanity's demands. Smiled, we want nothing. Silence. I do not understand, said slowly. You have something we need, something we cannot get anywhere else. Why would you give it away for free? Because that is what humans do, answered. We help those in need, even when they do not deserve it, even when they have hurt us. It is not a weakness, high speaker. It is our greatest strength. She turned to address the entire assembly once more. Earth will begin distributing the cure immediately. We will send ships to every affected system. We will set up treatment centers on any world that requests them. We ask for nothing in return except that you remember this moment. Stepped forward, her eyes sweeping across the stunned delegates. Remember that when you called us primitive, we responded with science that saved your lives. Remember that when you called us dangerous, we chose mercy over revenge. Remember that when you excluded us from your council, we still considered you worth saving. Tears streamed down the faces of dozens of delegates. Even the proud had bowed their heads. Humanity does not need your approval, continued. We do not need your respect. We know who we are. We know what we are capable of. And we know that true strength is not measured by power or conquest. It is measured by what you do when you have every reason to turn your back and walk away. She looked directly at. You asked what kind of species humanity is. Now you have your answer. The hall erupted into chaos. Delegates rushed toward the platform, shouting questions, crying, reaching out to touch as if she were some kind of miracle. Security teams struggled to maintain order. Holographic displays flickered as news networks across the galaxy broadcast the announcement to billions of waiting viewers. But through it all stood still and calm. She had delivered her message. The rest was up to them. On Earth, President watched the broadcast from her office. Doctor and stood beside her, their faces glowing with pride. "You did it," said softly. "You really did it." "We all did," replied. "Every human who refused to give up, every scientist who worked through the night, every person who believed that we could be better than our history." Wiped her eyes. "The first cure shipments are ready to launch. We can save millions of lives in the next few days alone." Nodded. "Then let us begin." Across the galaxy, the news spread like fire. Earth had saved them. The species they had dismissed and rejected had pulled them back from the edge of extinction. It was impossible to believe, and yet it was true. On the assembly station, approached as the crowd finally began to thin. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I owe your entire species an apology." Looked at him for a long moment. "We do not need apologies, High Speaker. We need you to learn from this. We need you to understand that the galaxy is stronger when all species work together, when no one is excluded because of fear or prejudice." Lowered his head. "You are right. I was wrong about humanity. We all were." "Then prove it," said. "Not with words, with actions. Build a galaxy worthy of the lives we are about to save." She turned and walked away, leaving standing alone on the platform where he had once condemned her species. The announcement was over, but the work was just beginning. Ships loaded with cure were already departing from Earth's orbital stations. Human medical teams were preparing to travel to every corner of the known universe. The largest humanitarian mission in history was, and it was being led by the species everyone had thought too primitive to matter. In her quarters, finally allowed herself to feel the weight of what had happened. She sat by the window and looked out at the stars. 1 year ago, she had stood in this very room and cried tears of frustration and shame. Now, she felt something completely different. She felt proud, not just of herself but of all humanity. They had faced rejection and responded with grace. They had been given every excuse to be cruel, and they had chosen kindness instead. This was what it meant to be human. And the galaxy would never forget it. 3 months after the announcement, the galaxy had changed. The void plague was dying. Trillions of beings had received the cure. Worlds that had been marked for quarantine were reopening their borders. Life was returning to normal. But nothing would ever truly be normal again. The great hall of the Galactic Assembly was full once more, but the atmosphere was different now. There was no arrogance in the air, no whispered insults, no delegates looking down at others. The shadow of death had humbled them all. High Speaker stood on the central platform, his voice echoing through the hall. "The Assembly has called this special session for one purpose," he announced. "We wish to formally invite humanity to join the United Species Council as a full member." A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Every delegate knew this moment was coming. It had been discussed in private meetings and public broadcasts for weeks. The question was not whether the invitation would be offered. The question was whether humanity would accept. Ambassador rose from her seat in the human section. She was no longer alone. A dozen other human diplomats sat beside her, representing the various nations and regions of Earth. Was there, along with Doctor and President herself, who had traveled from Earth for this occasion. Walked to the platform, her steps slow and deliberate. The hall fell silent as she took her place across from. "High Speaker," she said, "on behalf of Earth and all humanity, I thank you for this invitation." Allowed himself a small smile. "Then you accept?" Paused, the silence stretched on. "No," she said, "we do not." A wave of shock swept through the hall. Delegates whispered urgently to each other, stared at her, his face frozen in disbelief. "I do not understand," he said slowly. "We are offering you everything you wanted, full membership, voting rights. A seat on the inner council. Why would you refuse? Turned to face the assembly. Her voice was calm but firm. 1 year ago, when we asked for the same thing, you rejected us. You said we were primitive, dangerous, unworthy of your respect. And then, when you needed something from us, you changed your minds. She shook her head. We are not interested in membership that is given out of fear or guilt. We are not interested in a seat that we have to earn twice while others receive theirs simply for existing. If we had accepted the cure as payment for membership, it would have proven everything you believed about us, that we only help when there is something to gain. Looked at directly. We gave the cure freely because it was the right thing to do, not because we wanted anything in return. That principle does not change simply because you are now offering rewards. Lowered his head. Then what do you want? We want you to change, said. Not for us, for yourselves, for the galaxy. We want you to create a council where no species is rejected because of fear, where young civilizations are welcomed, not dismissed, where the value of a species is measured by its character, not its age or power. She paused, letting her words sink in. When you have built that council, humanity will be proud to join it, but we will not be the reason you build it. You must want it for yourselves. The hall was silent. For a long moment no one moved. Then slowly the delegate rose to her feet. Her golden fur had thick and healthy, thanks to the human cure. Tears streamed down her small face. She is right, they said. We have treated humanity shamefully. We laughed at them. We threw things at their ambassador. And when we were dying, they saved us anyway. They are better than we deserve. One by one, other delegates stood. The species that had been enemies of Earth now rising to admit their failures. We must change, the delegate said, not because the humans demand it, but because they have shown us what we should have been all along. Watched as the hall transformed around him. For 10,000 years, the had led the council. They had made the rules. They had decided who was worthy and who was not. And now they were watching their authority crumble, not because of war or conquest, but because a small species from a small planet had taught them what true leadership meant. He turned to. What you have done here today will be remembered forever, he said quietly. You have changed the galaxy more than any weapon ever could. Smiled. We have done nothing except be human. The rest is up to you. She stepped down from the platform and returned to her seat. President reached over and squeezed her hand. You have made us proud, whispered, all of us. The session continued for hours. Delegates made speeches. New proposals were introduced. For the first time in the Council's history, the rules of membership were being rewritten. No more would species be excluded because they were young or different. No more would fear determine who was worthy of respect. The humans watched it all from their observer seats. They had not asked for membership again. They had not demanded anything. They had simply shown the galaxy a different way, and the galaxy had chosen to follow. That evening stood on the observation deck of the assembly station. The stars stretched out before her in an endless sea of light. Somewhere out there, human ships were still delivering the cure to worlds that needed it. Human doctors were still healing the sick. Human hands were still reaching out in friendship. Found her there, staring at the universe. The Council has voted to create a new branch, he reported. They are calling it the Office of New Species Relations. They want to help young civilizations join the galactic community instead of turning them away. Nodded, that is a good start. They have also voted to erect a monument. On every world that received the cure, a statue of human hands reaching out in friendship. They want future generations to remember what happened here. Turned to look at him. And what do the humans of Earth say about all this? Smiled. They say it is nice to be appreciated, but they also say they did not do it for monuments or recognition. They did it because it was right. Good, said. That is exactly the right answer. She looked back at the stars. Somewhere out there, new species were being born. New civilizations were taking their first steps into the void. One day they would encounter the Council, and when they did, they would be welcomed, not rejected, because humanity had shown the galaxy a better way. In the end, Earth had never needed a seat on the Council. They had never needed approval or recognition from alien powers. What they had needed was the chance to prove who they really were. And they had proven it magnificently. The humans who had been called primitive had discovered the cure that saved the galaxy. The humans who had been called dangerous had responded to cruelty with kindness. The humans who had been excluded had transformed the very nature of the Council that rejected them. They had not conquered the galaxy. They had changed it, and that was a victory greater than any war could ever win. Smiled as she watched a human ship depart from the station, its lights blinking in the darkness. This was what it meant to be human, to face injustice with dignity, to answer hatred with love, to prove again and again that the measure of a species is not what it can destroy but what it can create. The galaxy had tried to exclude humanity, and humanity had answered by saving them all.